My name is Christine Ruana, and I'm going to share a few Visual Studio 2022 tips and tricks about updates and layouts. First of all, let me give you a brief refresher as to what layouts even are and what they're used for. By the way, you can find all the information that I'm summarizing in the Visual Studio Administrator's Guide, which can be found here. Layouts are basically a cache of all the Visual Studio packages that, when combined together, form the Visual Studio product. IT admins manage and maintain layouts, which they then usually store on an internal network share and make available for client machines to install from. Layouts are primarily used because the client machines don't have access to the internet, or the development team may want to standardize on a particular version of Visual Studio. Originally, everyone operated with the assumption that there'd be a single layout directory per major version of the product. Client machines would install from that layout location, and they'd simply keep updating themselves whenever the IT admin updated the layout. Well, starting with Visual Studio 2019, we introduced the concept of servicing baselines, which you can read about here. Multiple secure servicing baselines gave enterprises more flexibility and control regarding when they accept and deploy both security and feature updates across their organization. Unfortunately, though, the multiple servicing baseline model didn't always work well with the concept of a single layout. Customers started wanting to install from one baseline layout folder, like 16.7, and then update to another baseline layout folder, like 16.9. While conceptually this seems to be a simple hop, it just didn't always work correctly, especially if the layout was customized. I'm going to illustrate this problem here. For this demo, I've prepared 3 layouts on 3 different network servers. Each layout has a different version of Visual Studio, and each layout has a few customizations. So you can see that here, I have Visual Studio already installed on this client machine. And I installed it from a layout that has this very specific version, 16.7.12, which is what the IDE is reporting itself as. There's not much here. It's a very thin installation. I just installed the core workload just to keep things small and fast. This is the batch file that I used to install, and you can see I got it from this VS Layout Server 2, and I installed 16.7.12. That's what I used to do the initial install. Now I'm going to pretend I'm an IT admin, and I'm just going to try to update that client to another layout that's on another network share. There's a different network share right here. And this one has 16.9.9, which is another instance of our servicing baseline. So I'll just double click on this and try to install. And you can see that the first thing that happens is the installer is getting updated. But let's see what happens when it tries to update the product after it updates the installer. I'll give you a hint, there's going to be a problem. It's going to say no update available, which is a bummer because I know the update is there. The reason this error is showing up is because what I described earlier. The installer sometimes gets confused when the update location changes. It's really unfortunate because now I'm stuck. Like I can't update my client to the product in the second layout that I want. What do I do now? Well, the cleanest solution here is to use the goodness that we've put in the new updated Visual Studio 2022 installer. Now, in order to get that goodness, you need to get that 2022 installer on your client machine. By the way, you should just be aware that there's a single installer that manages all the Visual Studio files and all the instances and all the Visual Studio versions. It's one installer per machine. Now, there's several ways you can get the new installer on this client machine. And the easiest way for me to demo is I'm just going to install the first part of the 2022 product. You can refer to the online documentation for additional strategies on how to deploy this new 2022 installer to 2019 machines. And here I'm just went to the visualstudio.microsoft.com site, and I'm going to install the first part of the 2022 preview. You can use the release version as well. The installers work the same way. The very first thing that gets installed here is the installer, which is really convenient because that's all we need. So here the installer's updating to the 2022 version. And I'm going to just let the installer update, and I'm going to then abort the product installation because I actually don't need to install the 2022 product. I just want the installer. Now, once I get the installer on my machine, I'm actually, so here's a product. I'm just going to cancel this part out. So now that I have the updated installer, I'm going to try to basically update to my 16.9.9 version again. Let's see what happens. So it's verifying the installer is, sufficient version, and you're going to see that voila, the product is actually going to start to install. My client is being updated to 16.9.9 now, and there's no error. It's going to work. Once this product update is done, I'm going to show you a few more cool features that we've added to the installer. This whole experience of dealing with updates and layouts has been significantly improved in Visual Studio 2022. By using this new installer, you can now configure and change the location of your updates, including updates that are sourced from a layout. Furthermore, we've made these improvements compatible with earlier versions of Visual Studio, as I'm demonstrating here, since that's where our important enterprise customers are currently at. I encourage you to consider using the Visual Studio 2022 installer, especially if you're managing 2019 client installs from layouts. If you do this, if you do what I'm showing here, just be mindful of keeping the installer updated properly. The easiest way to do that is to put the 2022 product on the machine, because that'll keep the installer updated. But if you're not quite there yet, other strategies for keeping the installer updated is documented in our administrator's guide. So it looks like 16.9.9 is now pretty much installed. I want to call your attention to some other functionality we've added in the new Update Settings dialog that you can find by clicking on the More button. This is the feature that gives you control over updates. You see how the dialog shows that the Updates channel is set to private channel and that the package location is that network share that we just got 16.9.9 from? Well, now you can see that the update location is both visible and changeable. The two options we have here are the release channel, which is hosted by Microsoft and is currently offering 16.11.3. And we also have our private channel available to us, which is that private network layout channel that I just updated from. Now, private channel is not really descriptive. We didn't know what to call it other than private channel. So we've enabled a way to customize and add additional layout channels. Let me show you how. You see that I have the registry open to this particular location, and there's really not much stuff in here. Well, I created a little registry batch file or registry file that has information about how we should call the 16.9.9 layout. And I also am adding information for another layout that has 16.11 in it that I've already prepared. So I will just put this stuff in the registry and we'll see it's there. Here's some channel information, and I basically called them spring and winter update. And now when I come back to the Visual Studio installer, it'll automatically show that stuff. So you can see I went from private channel to the spring update. It basically matched the package location that's in the registry. And now I have winter available to me as well. I'm going to use this UI to configure my update channel to this winter update, which is offering 16.11.3. I'm basically going to change my update location, and I'm going to update my client again to 16.11.3. So I hope this demo illustrated some of the new capability that the Visual Studio 2022 installer provides to help you manage where and when your client gets updates from. This functionality is there to help IT admins keep their organizations updated and secure on servicing baselines. Everything I demonstrated here is available through both the UI and the command line, and it's enabled for the professional, enterprise, and build tools SKUs. Again, you can refer to the online documentation in the admin guide for details on how to use it, as well as the continued improvements we plan on making in this space. We always love to hear your feedback. Please submit it to the Microsoft developer community, which is accessible here, or through this place right here. We are committed to making you successful in deploying secure versions of Visual Studio across your organization. Thank you.